Calder Patty.
Jamie.
It's Jamie.
Penny Burston. Here.
Connie Bucci.
Here.
Heather Sanders.
Here.
Danny Wilson.
Here.
Amy Wilson. Here. John Sedota.
Here.
David Steyer.
Here.
Jim Swanson.
Here.
Tricia Thompson.
Here.
Okay, we have a forum to conduct business, and the meeting was duly noted. So let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving right along. Mission statement. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Okay, item D, agenda order approval revision. Anything? Jim?
I asked that the superintendent evaluation policy and exhibit, so basically sections 6 and 7 be removed from the consent agenda and be put in the discussion items.
Okay. And he's able to do that with no vote, so that's done. Okay, thank you. Okay, recommendations and commendations.
Hey, Bill. Board of Education of the School Districts of the Menomonie area recognizes William Dingwall for his work as a special education paraeducator at Wakanda Elementary. Every child that he comes in contact with is treated with kindness, dignity, and respect. We are lucky to have him in the SDMA. Congratulations.
Okay, today we have Oaklawn Elementary School with us. Yeah, come on up, guys.
My name is Leslie LeBaron, and this is King,
Liam, Thomas, Jeff, Henry, Peggy, and Lindsay Oregon.
So, I've been one of the advisors of Oakland Student Council for many years. So when Lindsay came to our school 3.5 years ago, I spoke with her before school started about asking me if she'd like to join me in student council, but that I wanted to change it up. And I asked her if we could change the group into a RAC group, or a Random Acts of Kindness group. Lindsay was on board and excited about our venture. Early this year, when Mr. Zajdowski began to talk about growth mindset, we felt even better about our change. We feel that a Random Acts of Kindness group, whereas we aren't always random, but rather intentional, plays into social and emotional learning and helping students grow in their awareness and mindset of how they treat themselves, their school, homes, community, and world. Our slides present only some of the things we do to increase the growth mindset of kindness at Oaklawn.
We want to start by reading Oakland's pledge. Please join us.
I
am a maker of peace. To me, peace looks like togetherness, sounds like laughter, and feels like happy times. I will make peace at home, at school, in my community, and in our world we share.
We did that to throw you guys off.
We read the Peace Pledge every Wednesday morning before school to remind students and staff to be peaceful and kind.
To show students we care about them and their caring for one another, we have done the following activities. Any adult at Oaklawn can nominate a student or an adult for act of kindness. In the past years, once nominated, the student would be recognized over announcements and got their name on our kindness table. They received a year, RAC students are doing cheers in classrooms for those recognized and putting their names on our monitor in the lobby. Here is an example of what the cheer sounds like when we visit a classroom.
Give me an K.
K.
Give me an I.
I.
Give me an N.
N.
Give me a D.
D.
What does that spell?
Kind.
Who is kind? Mrs. Carmen and Mrs. Schevenauer were kind.
What did they do?
They scraped the snow off every single staff member's car one night after school.
Each RAC meeting begins with a short 15-minute kindness blast. RAC students check in with adults and carry out tasks for them. Teachers know when our meetings are, so they are able to prepare for the help. This is a win-win situation because it is fun for RAC students to help and for the teachers to get help. Also, each week, RAC students deliver sample and share a meal food to students.
We found this calendar online. Each month has a different theme, such as Be Brave, Be You, Be One, or Be Here and Now. Each week there's a symbol given to reinforce the monthly theme. We post the calendar in the teacher's lounge, and then we do activities at some of the staff meetings. For example, in January, we gave staff fun paper and had them write down 5 positives about themselves. And then we plan to kind of transition that into RAC and have them lead some of these activities at future staff meetings.
Every year we celebrate RAC Week during February and plan many activities. This year we gave each classroom a kindness flower. Students complete an act of kindness shown on the flower, then they colored that part. When the flower was completed, they turned it into us. The picture on the screen shows one of the completed kindness flowers. In this particular classroom, students completed each task 5 times before they colored the flower. Wow, they were really kind.
During RAC Week, one of the activities we do is share a treat with all students. We put 2 treats at all 400 students' desks with a kindness message that said, take one and share one.
Every year for RAC Week, we do Warm-Up Wednesday. RAC students serve hot chocolate to parents dropping off their children in the morning. Many students want the treat too, but we say, today we are celebrating parents who work hard to get their kids to school each day. If weather finally cooperates, then we will do this on Wednesday this week.
During Peace Week in September 2007, we made signs that had peace parade along the sidewalk in Seminole Board. We had these signs and others said, "Hum for Peace." We received many hums showing us the drivers who support and desire for peace.
That September, we also had all the students at Hopeland paint boxes with a peace theme. Once completed, they were placed in the garden in front of the school for all to see.
In the fall, RAC gave pieces of white paper to teachers. Teachers told students to write or draw what these names could be. Then RAC put the papers together in a tiny peace board.
Last fall for International Day of Peace, we had Oakland students and staff make a peace sign. Mrs. Barron and Mrs. Hurston took this picture from the list of a fire truck. With the help of the Menomonie Fire Department, we did 2 separate pictures. This one is Grace Casey.
At our recent school dance, we raised money for UNICEF and Step Institute by selling water and popcorn. We sent kindness posters to area businesses and hopes of increasing peaceful attitudes in Menomonie. We also made placemats for the empty bowls event for 7th.
RAC recognizes Veterans Day annually. This year, the RAC team made a large banner to take to the DAV along with some treats.
At Christmas each year, we make homemade ornaments for a tree at the Dunn County Historical Museum.
At a future all-school meeting, RAC will be sharing the growth mindset statements such as these with students and staff. We want them to focus on saying things instead of this is too hard, changing that to this may take some time and effort.
So we have a few more slides to end our presentation to show how even without our prompting, teachers, students, and staff, they're finding their own ways to grow in kindness at Oak Lawn.
So you can just kind of flip through if you want. We just wanted to share those with you.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions or anything? Okay, great presentation.
Nice job.
I'd like to say everything you're doing fits right into our mission statement. Okay. Next, G, student representative communications.
All right, so winter sports are officially over and spring sports have begun, but most of them. Track began last week, and soccer, baseball, and softball had their first practices tonight. The rest of the spring sports will begin in the coming weeks. There's not much else to report on sports this week, seeing as they just started, but track will have its first meet on Friday at the MHS Fieldhouse.
For clubs and extracurriculars, the Thirst Project has been collecting funds to build a well in what was formerly Swaziland. The Road Warriors from Thirst Project educated students on the issues of clean water and sustainable wells. Jenna Bloomquist won first place at the county level contest and to receive second place at the West Central area level. Ving Chang received second place and Nicole Luoma received third place at the county level. And Destiny Holman got first place with her speech at the county level. This was a contest environmental biology students took part in. HOSA just competed at regionals and has 6 students qualified to move on to the state competition in April. They will also be hosting the Spring Blood Drive on March 20th. Science Olympiad will be competing in a state tournament this Saturday where they will hopefully qualify for the national tournament in New York. The Robotics Club competed at the CBTC Manufacturing Show last week and placed first place in the Autonomous Programming Challenge and second in the Teamwork Challenge. And DECA competed at state last week, in which they will take 4 students to the international conference next month in Orlando.
The high school music department has its annual Music at Our Schools month concert on Monday, March 18th in the high school gym. It will feature all high school music performing groups, including the bands, choirs, and orchestras. The jazz ensembles have a concert coming up at the Noble Tainter on Monday, April 8th at 7:30. The group is bringing in professional saxophonist Kenny Holman to perform with the group, and tickets can be purchased through the Mabel Tainter box office. The 6 through 12 band program has its annual Bandorama concert on Monday, April 15th at 7 p.m. This is rescheduled from a snow day in February. Once again, the UW Eau Claire Blue Gold Varsity Band will be joining the 6 through 12 bands for this performance. This year's musical, Catch Me If You Can, opened last Friday, and this week they will perform on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 7:30 p.m., and then on Saturday at 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. Seniors finished applying for the local scholarships this past month. Scholarships will be decided on sometime in the next month and will be awarded at the Senior Awards Night on Monday, May 6th. There will be a career fair at Menomonie High School in which juniors and seniors have the opportunity to attend and network with local employers on April. Are there any questions?
Okay, sounds like a lot of activity. Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you, ladies. Okay, moving on to community communications. I do have one. Before we get started on that, I'd just like to read a statement. Do I have more than one? Do you have one, Jeannie? Okay, this is the time for board members to listen to your concern and for you to express your opinion on issues. There should be no negative personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. You are speaking at a public meeting and your comments may appear in the newspaper and other news media. Be aware that school employees are private citizens and that legal action can be taken against anyone whose comment at a public meeting results in damage to an employee's professional reputation. If you have a complaint regarding the practices of any staff member, those comments should be directed to the staff member involved and his or her immediate supervisor. This is a time for board members to listen. They typically will not respond to questions or concerns in this portion of the meeting. Please indicate if you would like the board president to direct a member of the administration to respond to your concerns. The board cannot act on questions that are not on the action agenda. Okay, with that being said, Jane, and I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, Pierzina? Okay. You may come forward. Okay. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your mailing address, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jane Pierzina. My home mailing address is E5370 770th Avenue here in Menomonie. I'm the owner of Sunshine Learning Center. I have partnered with the school district of the Menomonie area since the inception of the 4K program 10 years ago. This collaboration has become more and more challenging as center expenses have continued to rise. For example, our food costs in the last 8 years have gone up 55%. Our classroom supplies have risen by 31% in that same 8-year period. During that time, those are just 2 examples of all of the ongoing expenses that everyone knows are going up each year. During that same 8-year period, the 4K per pupil reimbursement rate has stayed at an even $2,250 per student. Although during that period, the centers have asked for increases on an annual basis, none have been given. The centers as a group have done a lot of research, and we know that the school district of the Menomonie area gets $5,622 per 4K pupil from the state each year. Out of that, just over $1,300,000, we receive just 40% to actually implement the program. Out of the money that remains, we have also researched that the reimbursement rates in a number of school districts in our area, out of the 11 districts we have contacted, we are the lowest. We respectfully ask, as a group of centers implementing the 4K program on behalf of the school district of the Menomonie area, that it's considered that to implement and staff the program should warrant at least 50% of the dollars to successfully do that.
Thank you. Okay. Lee Marshall?
Lane Marshall, 24403 3rd Street, East Menomonie. I'm a fan of the district. I have 2 kids who went to the district. You all know that. You know I'm a proponent of equity, diversity, and inclusivity, both because of my personal beliefs and my job. I'm here with 3 requests and an invitation. The first request is about the consultant's report. I had asked for a copy of that report and the raw data, but I might not have asked officially enough, so I'm making that request now that I ask for a response, please. My second request is that the board consider continuing with equitable levels of engagement. Last fall, when I had some community time questions, I was told there would not be any response during the meeting. It felt awkward and impersonal, as if the board was separate from, or perhaps even above, the rest of the community. This year, a parent came before the board and spoke about her child and about a social media post. And in a short conversation, the president thanked the parent for speaking up, and there were words of apology. I hope the new president will continue to follow this interactive precedent during the community comments. The second thing I ask for is understanding and grace about communication. My New Yorker-based style is not as gentle as some native Midwesterners. I ask for your generosity of belief in the good intentions of people, myself and yourselves included. While I might disagree with some of your votes, I believe that each of you is on this board because you want to make the district a better place. You generally respond to community comments, even the quickie comments, as if they were offered in that spirit. And I ask that you work on offering each other that same consideration. For example, with the recent concern about a lack of condemnation of anti-Semitism on social media, I wonder how many of you went to the source of that concern and had a productive conversation. If you had done that, you might have learned why there was not condemnation and what was meant by the words posted. As a Jewish person, I was particularly concerned about this topic, so I asked, and I learned. And now I appreciate what was done and why it was done that way. All of us know that when people jump to conclusions and make public accusations, it can be harmful, but sometimes it is hard not to do exactly that. All of us know how to write also, but we might need this education and practice to be good journalists or novelists. All of us have thrown a ball, but most of us definitely would need schooling and practice before we join even like a recreational league, let alone a minor league. You are role models for our students, and you have the opportunity to show them the difference that education can make. That brings me to the invitation. I'm here to invite each of you to a Scout-sponsored professional development seminar on April 4th, in which people's own values and goals are used as the basis for effective communication across all forms of difference. We are busy people who already give a lot of time and energy, and I wouldn't suggest this workshop if I hadn't seen how very successful it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Lainey, just to be sure, your first request, you're requesting a consultant report. What are you asking for there?
The consultant's report and the raw data, because this report, my understanding, is like a summary of the comments that people made at the different information gathering events.
Are you talking about strategic planning?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I assume that you will get back to her. Dr. Zagalski will get back to you. Okay, moving along. All right, Leah, take it away.
Okay.
Revenue and expenditure report. Expenditure reports.
You want to pull up the revenue report first? We'll take a look at that. So our revenue report for the month of February, our total for Fund 10 is $14,535,668.95. We've received funding from several of the grants. We also have our Fund 10 tax levy revenues coming in for that, along with equalization aid. If you scroll down to the bottom, our Fund 21 gift account, so far we've received in $134,519.51. I am anticipating the Margaret A. Cargill Foundation gift donation here grant in March, and we should be reflecting that next month. And then our Fund 27 total revenue for the month of February is $961,038.40. Moving on to the expenditure side, if you want to take a look at the expenses by object. So the expenditures by object for the month of February totaled 44.29% compared to 53.39% last year, and the year prior was 46.67%. So slightly less, remembering last year we had that large debt service refinancing that kind of skews last year's percentage. I know, Jim, you had asked about utilities, the propane. We had a large purchase that totaled just over $6,000. We normally prepay about $2,500, which typically covers it, so our expenses for that are higher. And then our expenditures by function, if you want to pull that report up. Our overall Fund 10 percentage this year is 48.28%, or 45.72%, including encumbrances. The prior year is 44.42%. Fund 27, we're at 51.75% compared to 50.66%. So both those are slightly over prior year. And then our Fund 50, our food service account as well, we're at 56.1% compared to 54.31%. Food service, as you know, has taken a little bit of a hit with all the snow days, lost revenue due to that, but I don't anticipate any sort of fund transfer from Fund 10 to cover that, as food service does have a good fund balance if by chance it does go into a deficit spend. Does anyone have any questions?
On the food service, has there been much lost food as a result of the storms and that, or stuff that they had prepared that they couldn't use or not?
Not really. They managed that quite well. I think there was a little bit of loss with bananas that had been delivered, but.
Left out in the cold?
No. Seriously. No, overall it was pretty well. And they really, changed the menus and used up the food that they had out and banana bread.
I just had a quick question. Can you just help me out at the other non-program transactions? I know there's a reason why we have 1.73% this year, and then last year was 51.88. I was just wondering.
Which item is that?
Sorry, wait towards the bottom. Other non-program transactions, 49. I'm on the expense function.
490,000. That is with the $12,775.
Yes.
That, in that category is included there are tax levy chargebacks. And we did not have as high of chargebacks as previous years. And so the budget remains there. We don't know what that's going to be until the county lets us know. And so this year we haven't had much in the way of those chargebacks, so.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move right along. Board members, superintendent communications, and before we get into that, I'd just like to remind board members to please wait to be acknowledged, to speak so that everybody can hear you. And please put your cell phones away so that it's not a distraction to yourselves and others in the audience. Thank you. Any board members have any communication? Jim?
Last week I went to NAP in Red, and they told me I did a much better job of toxin size.
To me?
Yeah. Just kidding.
You probably did, Jim.
I ended up in that same class with the same book, ironically, but they wanted to hear it again, so it was a lot of fun. They loved that fun. So, yeah.
It is a tongue twister, isn't it?
It is. I used to love to read it to my kids too. And then I also read, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a really nice book on bullying also. It had a real nice story and lesson for them, so that was good. Then we went to the play on Friday night, opening night, and that was pretty amazing. A lot of people. A lot of singing, good stuff.
Anybody else? David?
Just congrats to the Ag Department. The FFA competed at the contest in Elk Mound here and sent a lot of students on to sectionals. And they also, our group competed at CVTC this last week. And I know the advanced dairy science class won that competition as well. So the Ag Department had a good week.
Anybody else? Okay, Dr. Joe?
So did they really say that you did a better job?
No.
Boy,
I was just teasing you, Joe.
That was hurting my feelings. Jim mentioned the school musical, and because of the weather that was coming in on Saturday, the schedule got changed. So there are extra performances this week. Mr. Munoz, are they actually going to do 2 performances on Saturday, did I see?
Now they are, yes.
Okay.
5 and 7:30.
Okay, and then also...
7:30 Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
So it's going to be a lot of activity for those students, but they put so much time in, we don't want weather to stand in the way of making sure they have enough opportunity to present. So looking forward to that this week. A few other things. The group from Oakland did a great job today, and they mentioned the Growth Mindset Challenge. And that's something that I issued to all of our schools about 6 weeks ago when we started having all these snow days. And I'll be going from school to school and working with the principals, and we're going to do a little judging of the different growth mindset presentations. It's really neat. Some students did like a little video clip. They did it together and maybe acted out a little scenario where a student was demonstrating the power of yet. They might not be able to solve this problem yet, but eventually they will. And the research behind the growth mindset really is quite amazing. I know the board members are familiar with it, but there's other things that are posters and drawings and things like that. So I'm really excited to do that. The school board candidate forum last week, really appreciate the League of Women Voters putting that on. It was very encouraging to see 6 people very interested, very supportive of public education in Menomonie. I left there feeling really good about the future of our school district. I did want to follow up on just a couple things that were discussed. It's hard to sit there at the forum and not have the opportunity to add to the discussion. But first of all, there was a question right away about elementary activities and expanding activities in the fine arts and in the theater. And I think that's a great opportunity and a great idea for our school district, something that we have been investigating and something that I think we should continue to look at. However, I think there is a misconception. I think some people think that a lot of the sports that are offered in that age group are put on by the school district, and that isn't the case. The things like the Little League, the Menomonie Baseball Association, the Hoops Club for the girls and boys basketball, the wrestling, all that stuff that you see these kids so involved with, that those are all private entities, private groups, where parents and interested community members and businesses are putting on those activities. The school district doesn't start putting on sporting activities until you get to 7th and 8th grade, when you get to the middle school sports. So I definitely think that we should continue to look at different opportunities, but right now in the elementary schools, student council, kind of like we saw tonight with Oaklawn, and then you know, there is some science Olympiad, but that's really more on a volunteer basis too. So just wanted to clear up that misconception. There also was some talk about staff retirement. I think one of the candidates might have been a little misinformed about changes to staff retirement. We still are part of the state retirement system. I want to make sure everyone understands that. The Wisconsin retirement system. We did change some of our local early retirement benefits a while back, and maybe that's what he was alluding to, but we feel like we have a very good plan and a very competitive plan for our staff. And then communication in the district, and I thought some of the board members and candidates answered the question well. We absolutely value what our staff members think and what our staff members say when it comes to decision making. And almost everything that comes to the board level for a decision has been run through multiple processes, most of the time starting at the department or grade level, working up through the building level, and then through district processes, whether it be through the lead team or whether it be through the QIC or other committees. So we definitely value staff input and staff involvement in decision making. And you know, we do think there are times where certain processes need to be followed and a chain of command needs to be followed, especially if we're talking about something that's formal in procedure. But we do value the idea of all of our staff members participating in the governance of our school district. And lastly, student voices. There were a couple comments in the candidate forum. Again, I don't quite know where that came from about whether or not we value our students and the student voice and how we engage with the students when they come to the highlight on youth. I thought tonight was a great example, and I saw board members very engaged in what was happening here tonight. So I'm very excited about our highlights on youth and what we're doing with our students and our student council reps providing us updates. So sometimes, you know, people know what's going on in the district. I appreciate that, you know, once in a while some of our candidates come to a meeting. Good to see you here, Baird. Other times I think maybe some people are making some decisions based on what they may perceive, but may or may not be accurate. So good luck to all the candidates, and that's my update for today. Oh, last thing, Brian reminded me. We have a really neat thing going on today and tomorrow. The school district here and then also UW Stout are meeting with our grantors for the Arts Integration Menomonie project. And that's a terrific project where we're integrating the arts across our school district. And it's kind of a big meeting to look at the past 5 years and also look into the future. It's a terrific program. It's a program that really is special to Menomonie. And maybe we should, you know, somehow market it more than what we already are. But it's something pretty neat about how we're providing opportunities for collaboration between the university, the school district, and local artists, and then bringing that into our classroom and supporting our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next is the monthly employment report. Is that okay? And it's mainly for information purposes. Anybody have any questions? Okay, going to the consent agenda. I entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda, but remember we took number 6 and 7 out, so we won't be voting on those at this time.
I move for the consent agenda.
Okay. Your second. Second by David. Any discussion? Okay, Patty, let's take the vote. I mean, Jenny, take the vote. I'm gonna have to write that real big somewhere.
Most board members never work with pay. For some of them.
Okay.
Yeah, you're dating yourself there.
For anybody who's not catching the inside joke, my assistant was Patty Woodford. She retired a couple years ago, but Amy's been on the board for a while and she remembers Patty quite well, so she keeps calling Jamie Patty on accident.
Please forgive me.
Penny, did you vote?
I accidentally logged myself out, but I vote yes.
All right,
I'm not getting back in.
Yeah, I've manually entered.
Awesome. Here,
Here we
I
go.
have it too. There we go. Sorry about that.
You're a little touchy.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, now, I have a question, clarifying question. Do we go to action agenda now to discuss those, or do we wait and do the personnel consent agenda first?
I would suggest doing the personnel consent agenda and following the order.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Heather and David.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Flannery.
Heather and Dave.
Any questions? Okay, Jamie, will you please take the vote? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Now, we're going to be discussing items number 6 and 7 that were taken out of the consent agenda. Policy 225, District Administrator Evaluation, and Exhibit 225, District Administrator Evaluation Template.
Where are they now?
Okay, I think there's a little bit of a confusion there, Amy. So, board policy says that a board member can request that items get taken out of the consent agenda and put on the action agenda. The action agenda is listed after the closed session tonight,
Okay.
but it looks like they got put in the discussion agenda.
Well, that's what I had requested.
Oh, you said discussion?
Yes.
Let's see here.
It's actually, I can tell you where it is.
Can you take something from an action and move it back to discussion?
We're getting from a discussion to an action.
Yeah, discussion. It was under an action agenda.
As long as it was posted originally as potential action, action can be taken. And the board policy says that, I have it up here. Any item may be moved from the consent agenda to the action agenda at the request of any board member. So I would suggest putting it in the action agenda, and then if the board decides not to take action, that can happen there as well.
Okay. So it's under number 7?
So, all right, I will move those out of discussion then.
Okay, so we want to wait till we get to the...
Yeah, you can just wait.
Okay, then we'll wait. We're just about there anyway.
I would ask if there's any objections to that.
Okay, any objections to that?
Perfect.
Okay, so it'll be discussion, and should we just put it right at the end of the discussion?
It's not.
Just
It's in
leave
the
it
action
out.
after
Leave it out.
it's
Leave
stopped.
it out just in the action agenda.
Oh.
Maybe you'll put it in the action.
Oh, okay,
agenda
I see.
after the closed session.
Okay, I see. So we'll wait till then?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we are on to discussion items. And the Discussion A, elementary transportation for 2019-2020.
So I appreciate the work that Mrs. Momsen and Mrs. Smith did working on this with Menomonie Transportation. So tonight, Susan and Lori are going to go ahead and give you an update on the elementary transportation for next year.
So basically, we've met with Ryan from the bus company in January and started the conversation about what that might look like, knowing that it was a 2-year commitment, that the district would continue that busing transportation. And much of the conversation that we had prior to this 2-year commitment was made with Dave Howe. And so Ryan was kind of coming up to speed, gave him some time to pull together some of that data and take a look at how that might affect his routes and whether or not that would be advantageous for him to continue busing or not continue busing. He came back with some data for us that was quite surprising, which was that basically that transportation continuing as it is with a bus switch around Cedar Falls School, where kids coming from Oakland and kids coming from Wakanda are basically all gathered and then do a drop, and they kind of exchange buses and then go to their schools that they're supposed to, would actually be a benefit for them to continue that route. It would cause perhaps some overloads that they're not prepared for right now, but they said they'd be willing to do whatever the school district wants to do at this point. So we talked through it, and we looked at our numbers and how that might affect things if we were to say we're done, and a lot of families would be adversely affected by stopping that transportation. And so we talked through those pieces. We met again with Ryan, we talked with Dr. Zadowski, and came up with a plan that it might be best for this year if we continue that transportation for families.
So we talked with the other elementary principals about this as well in the context of our annual attendance area exceptions and having those submitted and approving them. So what we talked through with Joe was the opportunity that we would put a letter out to families and let them know that on a year-by-year basis, we would review this with Menomonie Transportation for the impact it would have on the budget, as well as services to families. And as long as Susan and I are able to balance class sizes between the two schools and keep them reasonable, we both feel this is something that we can support for another school year.
Thank you. Any questions?
Amy, I would just like to emphasize that we're still encouraging families to attend the school in their attendance area because we don't know if it's going to continue. Transportation can change drastically each year. So if you want to maintain some sort of consistency, going to the school in your home area would be suggested. However, we're happy to be able to provide this opportunity for 2019-2020.
And Ryan Howe echoed that. He really has a hard time anticipating where the growth has come as we saw 2 years ago when we were trying to anticipate, and some of the board members were on that committee talking about what to anticipate, some of the growth that they've seen even in the 2 years that we've had this plan. We've noticed a lot of shifts and areas that we didn't see kids coming into are coming into. So, thank you. Jim?
How many of the families that have caught in the shifting boundaries that are using the busing, how many of them will be moving on to the middle school? How long do you just anticipate there be people requesting this?
Well, when we look through the numbers, there are some single or younger children, and this is the end of their family needing these services.
Okay.
But we also looked at about a dozen families, either wanting to go one way or the other, that had multiple children still in our elementaries.
That doesn't seem like a big deal, but 12.
Yeah. 12 times 3 is 36, and then we spread those through the school. Yeah.
Are there any issues with Cedar Falls at the exchange? Do they need supervision, or is that something the bus will just handle up there?
Because it's off-street and in the parking lot with the permission of the current owners, we found that it's been a safe transfer point, and that actually the bus drivers feel good and comfortable about making the transfer at that location. So as long as the people who own the old Cedar Falls School are willing to allow the transfer point, I think it's a good, safe place for it to occur.
And they keep it plowed?
Reasonably so, yes.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Letter B, staffing plan for 2019-20.
About the staffing plan for next year, the board recently saw the preliminary budget proposal, and there was about almost $850,000 of space in the preliminary budget estimate for next year. However, what we talked about at that time was that we knew there was going to be some increasing staffing needs for 2019-2020, and the staffing summary in front of you definitely shows that. So what we did is, this is one of those collaborative processes where we've been talking with staff members for quite some time. Last spring I visited every single school. The principals, through their building leadership teams and through the departmental meetings, submitted requests of potential staffing additions for next year. The total figure for all requests is about almost $1.8 million. So if we had unlimited resources, we definitely could spend another $1.8 million next year and increase staff. Through the discussions with the principals, with the district administrators, we've tried to put together a tiered system to help provide some guidance for the board. And what we consider to be needed for basic services next year, in other words, continuing with the services that we have currently, it'd be looking at about $223,000 because of increasing enrollment in some areas, increasing caseloads in the area of special education. We feel that at least level 1 will be needed to offer continuing services next year. When we start looking at level 2, additional staffing requests, level 2 is estimated to cost about $523,000. We think those are services that very much could benefit the students. We see changing student needs over time, and we've heard a lot about that here at the board level, also through the beginning of our strategic planning process. But the needs for more social worker and social emotional learning support, counseling support at middle school and high school, transition coordination for our special education students at the high school, ELL services across the school district, and then increasing music instruction at the middle school and high school. We feel that that level 2 really, it would be services beyond what we're currently offering, but we think there'd be a lot of bang for the buck when we look at level 2. Level 3 and level 4 are also, we feel, very good services. Nothing on this list would I would consider to be fluff. However, when you start looking at the available budget dollars, right now I would say that this could be challenging. With the preliminary estimate, we did factor in $200 a student of new revenue coming from the state. There are a lot of question marks yet with the state budget. We're hoping that it could even be more when you start looking at possible increases in special education categorical aid. But right now there's just a lot of talk in Madison, and it's a little preliminary to think about any kind of action. We will tell you that we have filled, tonight we appreciate the board voting on the personnel consent agenda. We've filled several positions that are continuing positions already in the school district. But what we're seeing is that the candidate pools continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. We're very fortunate in Menomonie where we feel that we really do get terrific applicants. Even though the size of the pool is smaller, we think that the quantity is smaller, quality is still very, very good. In some cases, better than it's ever been. However, when we look at the potential of hiring additional school counselors or any of these positions, especially the special education positions, for getting some direction from the board sooner than later is very important. In fact, depending on the discussion tonight, I could even see posting some of these right away, hoping for approval in April, and then hiring right away, because it is going to be very, very competitive out there. But at this point, I think that's a little bit putting the cart before the horse. I'd like to hear the board members have the opportunity to provide input, feedback, and any direction that you might have.
Tanya?
I am personally super excited to see the transition coordinator position on there as a level 2. Was curious as it's a 0.5. Is this something that can be combined? Like say if there's another special ed, that moves or whatnot, that could be more enticing for someone to come, that we could fulfill part special ed, high school, and then the other half as a coordinator. Would that be a consideration?
Tony, would you like to take that question?
I think that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I want you to know that the special ed that's on here is narrowed down from what, maybe my original plan was, so that's why that's why I have prioritized, our needs. You would hope that you would still be able to find, but we have had discussions about adding that. We do not currently have, though, another half-time special ed position within the district.
Would the person have the same type of certificate, say, between the middle school and the high school?
It could, and with the flexibility of the halftime, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would be there every day, half the time.
Okay.
It could mean that we talk about the amount of days, because I think there's certain times during the year that that position needs more time than less time, especially as you're getting things set up. If you're talking about job placements for students, there's a time that happens, and then once students have that job, it kind of lessens out. So the halftime would allow for some of that more flexibility.
Is 0.5 a typical position size for our kind of school district?
It
or
could
how
be, I've seen them halftime, I've seen them combined with a teacher, and it's only a 0.1 or a 0.2. I've seen them all different ways how they kind of do that.
Super.
Tricia?
The transition coordinator we had before, was that a full-time position?
It was before I came,
Okay.
so I'm not even quite sure. So it was 6+ years ago before me.
Wow, it's been that long.
It has been that
David?
Could you talk a little bit about the music position, the .83 on level 2 on high school, with how that falls on that?
Sure, we had a really good meeting with the music department, even though the meeting got rescheduled 4 times because of the weather. There definitely is a need for more support in music at the high school. However, we'd like to do it in a way that provides some sustainability. And when we look at the needs of the English department and the possible combination of English along with theater, that provides for some opportunity. But then also, when we look at Knapp and Downsville, our current music teacher is part-time music and part-time interventionist. She's actually going to be moving into Wakanda next year in a full-time music role. So we are looking at different staffing plans for Knapp and Downsville. And that specialist plan of sharing teachers has been very, very challenging. I know that you've heard, especially the board members who serve on QIC, have heard how problematic that has been. In some cases where classroom teachers have gone almost full days without any kind of break on one day, and then the alternating day they have a lot of break because all the specialists are lined up. This year we had a plan with art where we're sharing a teacher with Knapp Downsville on the high school, and it's gone very well. And we think there's the potential there to partner that with music and then still provide a full-time position. Because we've tried, like a lot of rural schools, you try all sorts of different staffing plans, and the challenge is if you offer less than a full-time position, your chance of any kind of sustainability is almost minimal. So we're looking to try to find ways to make those full-time positions and really try to benefit 3 different needs with one position.
Jim?
So I'm just glad to see the MMS music, because we had to hire that kind of emergency person in the middle of the year because they were so overloaded, and it kind of seemed to me like we were slapping the Band-Aid on a really bad wound. You know what I mean?
And we were.
And so it would be really nice to make that full-time and have another person there so they can do a good job.
I really think all the level 2s are needed, including that middle school music position.
Tricia?
And that was going to be my question, is how do you envision that middle school music teacher being used?
Well, it'd be a combination of mostly band and general music, which would provide some relief across the board. Mr. Betcher, do you have any additional comment on how the additional music teacher would be used at the middle school?
Specifically with band, there would be relief because of the two rooms right next to each other and orchestra being at the high school in the morning, so the band would work together in the morning. Both of the teachers would work together, and then in the afternoon hours, we would have more of the general music being taught. That is the plan right now.
The new middle school schedule has been tremendous, and we've had a ton of positive feedback from students, parents, and teachers. However, it requires more staffing than what we currently have. I think our staff and Mr. Betcher and the administration over there have done a terrific job making it work this year, and I think some of the Band-Aids, as Jim mentioned, have been very effective, but it's not a sustainable plan that we have right now. It needs more staffing.
I thought of another question. Oh, did someone else raise their hand? Sorry. I remember at one point there was a concern about not being able to do small group lessons. Is this going to hopefully alleviate some of that concern and allow for that to happen? You know?
This will definitely increase lesson time. I think if you talk to our teachers, they would, would never be enough lesson time. My understanding, this definitely will help. Brian, you were in on those discussions. Do you have anything to add to that? Does that add that? So it'll increase it.
Penny, just a question, and this is my misunderstanding just because we haven't talked a ton about 4K programming, but the 4K programming, I know we don't specifically hire those teachers, but how does that affect our staffing plan in regards to the funds that the 4K groups are looking at in addition to what we're thinking about?
That's a good question, because that is next on the agenda, and so we won't talk much about the.
Yeah,
but we are recommending, after having a great opportunity to meet with the 4K providers, we are recommending an increase, and we're recommending a sizable increase. That increase was not included in the preliminary budget estimate. So when we talk about $850,000, if we look at the 4K plan, which is next, that's about 32,000, Brian, 35. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Between 26 and 38,000.
Okay, so that would cut into our ability to, go as far down with the staffing plan as we'd like. The busing alone for 4K with Head Start eliminating their transportation, that's going to be $80,000 change to next year's budget. So that does need to be considered.
But you feel comfortable in doing steps 1 and 2 at least, and looking at the 4K fund, sorry. But you feel comfortable in doing steps 1 and 2 at least, and then still addressing the 4K needs as well.
Right now, I think our best projection is level 1 and level 2 are needed enough that we should do them. I hope that we will be able to fund them and still balance the budget. If not, I think it'll be close. But again, we don't know what's going to happen in Madison. But we have had year after year of ending in the black. I do think it's wise for us to make the investment. And if we have to make some adjustments the following year, I think we could do that. We do have adequate fund balance to get us through a year if we have to. But when you look at the totals moving forward, we costed it out for you so you can see the 5-year and 10-year projections. It's expensive, and we don't want to be adding programming and then coming back and laying off people either. At the same time, it doesn't have to be the last sentence is the first thing out. We need to continue to mobilize our resources to meet the needs and expectations of our community, and that's what I preach all the time. Is that's our job, is to align these resources. And I think level 1 and level 2 really do that. I would love to see us do level 3 as well, but I would suggest we wait on level 3 until we have a better idea of what's happening in Madison, whether that be closer to the summer, whether it be into next year. I still would like to see us do level 3 at some point. I just can't recommend that today.
David.
That was my question. Could you just talk a little bit about the first 3 points on level 3?
Well, when we talked earlier about the elementary activities, right now our Science Olympiad at the elementary level is really volunteer-based. Terry Selby does do some coordination with that, But because it's volunteer-based, there is some inequity. You know, some elementary schools find people that are more interested in helping than others. By making those paid positions, Mrs. Stalby thinks that would, you know, maybe make it a little more equitable. But again, I think that's maybe a philosophical decision the board needs to talk about. At what level do we want to start offering, you know, extracurricular, co-curricular, fine arts, athletics? You know, how far down do we want to go? So elementary science Olympiad coaches, extending work days for building level clerical. I mean, our clerical people, they work really, really hard. And, you know, there's more and more data that needs to be entered and kept track of, and medicines that need to be administered. I mean, that job has not gotten any easier. So adding 5 work days is something that we could consider. Again, I don't know that we need to decide that today, but that's definitely something that's on the list. And then library media clerical hours. We ask a lot of our clerical in our libraries. That's another, you know, extending those hours is something that could be beneficial. And then finally, we've had some discussions about the environmental side, and we continue to try different staffing to maximize the use of the environmental side. We've done a lot of studying there, and I think we could have a large benefit by having someone be a coordinator and an instructional science coach. We've made great strides with our science curriculum in the last year, and having someone like we have for our ELA, language arts, and our math, having even if it's not a full-time person, having a part-time science coach, I think we could really get a lot of bang for that buck. So if the board's comfortable with it, I'd love to see us go to level 3. I just wish I had a better idea of what the finances are going to be for next year.
Excuse me.
Could you potentially take, say, a level 3 item and move it into level 2? Can you kind of mix and match? If that's, or is it kind of laid out by priority?
It's laid out by priority. Certainly the board, you know, we serve at the board's pleasure, and I do want to get some feedback from our QIC groups. We did have a meeting canceled because of the weather, and we're going to be meeting again in early April before the April school board meeting, before we ask you to take action. So I would like to share this. You know, I know the principals have had a lot of discussions, but not many people have seen it in this type of categorized fashion. I'd be a little leery of bumping things up and down too much. I think it's pretty well set, but certainly we'll do whatever the board wants.
I was just thinking the building level clerical with, you know, if that moved to a level 2. Because I mean, previously serving on QIC, I mean, they have talked about how strapped they are and trying to get everything ready for first day and stuff, so.
Yep.
I just didn't know if that was an option or not, but.
It certainly could be, Heather. I mean, it's $14,000, it's not, but you gotta draw the line somewhere.
Right,
that's the tough part. But I also think that's something, Heather, that could be added later than some of these other ones. You know, some of these we need to post, we need to interview,
Right.
we need to get them in here. You know, building level clerical, I think, you know, it'd be nice if they could go into the summer knowing how many days they're gonna work. But if the state budget gets done in, you know, September, or if it really starts to get down there and we have a better idea what it's going to be, I don't think going to the building level clerical and saying, hey, you know, we'd like to offer you 5 extra days this year, even if we do it during the school year next year, I don't think that's necessarily a problem.
David?
I guess I'd be willing to, you know, forward the first 2 levels on to our next meeting for approval. But I'd also like to take a look at level 3, and depending on what happens with the state budget, to make sure that we bring that back for review, and then also get QIC's input on the committee, what they think on this proposal.
Tricia?
I think what I need is some additional clarification for the middle school adaptive music and the elementary adaptive music. So do we currently offer adaptive music?
We do. We offer at the high school level some adaptive music where students with special needs have their own music class. And that's something that was investigated and discussed about maybe expanding that down to the middle school and elementary. Tony, would you mind speaking to that just for a minute in terms of least restricted environment and what was discussed?
It is offered at our high school, so kids are, if it's part of their IEP, they might take adaptive music, but they're typically not in a general ed music class then. It is a separate class. At an elementary level, I don't necessarily believe in pulling children out of their regular music class and put into a separate class designed for students with special needs. I think at that level, providing inclusion opportunities as much as possible to meet their needs is, to me, that's the direction that I would like to continue to go. So to add adaptive, another option at an elementary level to pull kids out of general ed is not a direction I would like to go.
See, some of our students, especially at the elementary, but even middle school level, you know, depending on what their needs are, they may be self-contained for most of the day and most of their programming. And, you know, sometimes music is one of the few opportunities that some of our students have to be mainstreamed or to be included. And I agree with Tony. I don't think it's a good practice, and I don't think it's something that I can support either.
And I'm just asking for clarification.
I think it's a great question, Trish. I appreciate the question.
And then, so my question is then, are those kids with IEPs then supported in those classes? Okay.
If needed, it's based on IEPs.
Okay. So this is just a curiosity question. With adaptive Phi-Ed, how does that, I mean, is it offered at the elementary level as
Yes.
well? Okay, so.
If needed.
Okay, and does that teacher work with the regular Phi-Ed teacher, or is it separate?
It's the same teacher. So in our elementary schools, our teachers are adaptive certified, so they do both. It really depends on the students. Some kids receive their adaptive Phi-Ed within a general ed class, so those accommodations can be made. Some are pulled out, so they might go to general Phi-Ed and get additional, so like pre-teaching, reteaching of some skills, and some just do adaptive. So it really depends on which particular student and what their needs are.
But then at the high school, we
do have a separate adaptive class. Yep.
For music and for Phi-Ed?
Yes.
That's just different in high school.
And I would say for music specifically, you know, I look at sometimes this music, it becomes a little more competitive at a high school level, and some the opportunities for students, I think, become less for students with severe needs. So that gives them an opportunity to still perform at the level that they can perform at.
Dan? I remember that there was adaptive music at the middle school at one time. I don't know if it's still going.
Prior to, there has been a little bit here and there, but as far as a structured course, I think that was before me.
Anybody else?
Yep, sorry.
Tricia?
This is just confusing to me. The adaptive music class then, is it they're actually getting to perform? It's not just teaching the general ed or general music class?
Are they performing? Do they perform? Oh, yes, they do perform.
They do,
Yeah.
When we're talking,
And David would probably be a good person to ask about this too. But what they do is, I believe they've been included with the spring performance. They also, in my experience, have worked on, like Jake will put together some sort of a video with them, and so they're kind of performing with administrators or with teachers, and then they're putting that together, that technology piece together. So, David, are there other opportunities that you know?
Well, they have several outreach opportunities that are other than the district line. So they have outreach opportunities at local churches, one in particular that I can think of, and you know, at least one time a year, but I think it's more than one time a year. So
is it pretty popular?
I would say so.
Yeah.
The feedback's been very positive.
You're talking about the Joyful Noise Choir?
yes,
Yeah, yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah,
yes,
it
yes.
is.
Anybody else? Jim?
I just urge all board members to put your legislators and senators on speed dial and tell them to give public education lots of money.
Thank you. And just to end this conversation, I'd just like to say that, first of all, it's a good conversation, and I really appreciate the thought that went into this. Levels, level 1 and level 2, I really am appreciative of. I really like the idea of adding more specialists that will help with mental health issues. I think that's huge, and also music. So I appreciate the principals and the staff and you, Joe, for making sure that those are listed in there. And I hope we can even go further down than level 2, but
So if I could just ask, would anybody on the board object to us posting these positions in level 1 and level 2? We would not hire them until the board takes a vote in April. Does anybody object to posting? Awesome. Sam, we got a lot of work to do.
okay, moving right along. 4K programming agreements.
Okay, Brian, if you could take this one, that'd be great.
All right, as you're aware, 4K is a program that we offer in our district, and we partner with our community members, several of our daycare sites, the University of Wisconsin Stout, Head Start, and St. Joe's is our current parochial sponsor. The program has been in operation since the 2008-2009 school year, and during that time, we've had a good relationship, good partnership. In November of 2018, I extended an invitation out to our 4K directors to open up a conversation and review of our 4K agreements. We had meetings that took place in December, January, February, and then March on topics that included current reimbursement rates, the calendar, professional development, site evaluations, and overall teacher workload. As you've seen in your background information, our current reimbursement rate sits at $2,250. That current rate was established in the 2009-2010 school year. Currently, it is the lowest in our area as far as our comparables for sites that offer a community-based program. So we agree that it needs to be increased at this time. During that time frame, since 2009-2010, the SDMA has absorbed cuts in aid from the state following Act 10. During that same time frame, we did not lower our local reimbursement rate for the providers. With state aid now finally catching up to the levels that it was at in 2009 and 2010, it's being recommended that that reimbursement rate be increased and be a topic that is revisited annually at this point in time. Because of that, and based off of the conversation up to this point, we have looked at a couple of different options, and we're recommending that we start with a CPI increase of 2.44%, which equates to $54.90 per student, plus an additional rate adjustment. And then we have two different tiers that we are recommending. The first tier would have a rate adjustment of $65, which would bring that up to an increase of and then an increase of $120 for tier 2. So what that translates to, that tier 1 would increase the rate to a new rate of $2,370.90 per student. That estimate would add an additional $26,138.20 in estimated 4K payments on an annual basis if all sites were at that level. It's a 5.3% increase, would add flexibility into the 4K calendar and reduce the frequency of the evaluation process that we currently do. Tier 2 would be a 7.8% increase. It's an overall increase of $174.90 per student, brings that new rate to $2,424.90 per student. Tier 2, if all sites were on that level, would add an estimated cost to our 4K program of $38,138.20. Again, if all sites were at that level. That does add flexibility into the calendar. It does bring our report card windows in alignment with our kindergarten. Currently 4K has 2 report card windows as a requirement. This would add a third, which our kindergarten has as a reporting period. And it includes an evaluation benchmark score into that piece, and then also a requirement, I guess I should say, of having sites turn in lesson plans to the district level so that we could use those as a professional development process and ongoing improvement. A couple of things to also take into consideration. Dr. Zadowski mentioned the need to look at busing for 4K. Currently, with about 250 students in 4K, our busing is essentially at capacity with the number of students that we can bus. Head Start has requested that we add busing for their site. They've made the decision to discontinue busing at the Head Start location. For comparison, in 2017-2018, our last full school year that we have a transportation cost, our busing cost for 4K and early childhood came to $286,095.09. Early childhood program that is at Wakanda typically has between 15 and 20 students. The reason why I include that is they ride the bus with our 4K students, so that's in there. It's anticipated next year with adding busing for students who we could bus to Head Start, plus our existing busing being at capacity. It would cost us an approximate $80,000 in increased cost for next year. So that busing cost for 4K in early childhood next year is estimated to be at $366,095 to bus our 4K and early childhood students. If we take a look at the rate increase recommendations that we're recommending tonight, plus the busing costs that we're looking at, those two items together, depending on the tiered system, would put our estimated new program costs for 4K between $106,138 to $118,138 for next school year, above and beyond what we currently are spending on 4K this current school year as far as what is estimated. One piece of information as far as the estimates that we did, we currently have an AM and a PM program at River Heights Elementary for 4K. The rate increase, we did not factor in the students that are included at that site into the rate increase because we don't turn around and pay ourselves for that purpose. So these estimates don't include the 31 students that we typically have at River Heights on an annual basis. So in short, we've had I think some very productive conversations over the last few months since November. Our sites, they've been a good partner with us. We feel that an increase is something that we do need to take a look at. And we also feel that it's something we need to come back on an annual basis to revisit. At this point, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Heather.
So just to clarify, River Heights is not included in this plan.
Correct. The estimates, the dollar estimates are not. We operate that site with a teacher that we hire as a district employee, and then currently we have a program assistant in the morning, and then depending on IEPs, there have been times when we will also have a special education aide sometimes assigned there as well. But yes, River Heights, the busing piece, we do bus students to River Heights, so they're included in our busing costs, but they're not included in the rate increase projection.
Tricia.
Okay, I got several questions for you. The money that we're getting from the state, and I totally get that there was years where, we were on the other end of things, but where does that additional money go that we're not using to reimburse these sites?
Okay, well, Leah, do you want to answer that?
Sure, it comes in the form of state aid and goes into our general operations fund 10. So we use that to offset all the expenditures and operations of the district, including 4K.
Yeah, we don't segregate it out in its own special fund.
So one of the things as I was trying to read and understand this is, do we have a backup plan if they, for some reason, are like, yeah, financially we can't do this anymore? What do we do?
Well, that's a good question. We have investigated a lot of different ideas. It certainly would not be easy, but we would continue to offer 4K. As you may be aware, there's even a proposal right now at the state level of looking at all-day 4K. So, you know, as we talked about in strategic planning, I think you're going to see different ideas come forward. You know, whether we look at some sort of early learning child center, whether we look at trying to use some other facilities in the district. We are at capacity at some of our elementary schools. Some may or may not be able to be added on to, but there are also other venues in our community that could possibly service this type of programming. I like the community-based provider approach. I think it's been successful here in Menomonie, but there are some inequities and there's some inconsistencies that go along with that. We're hopeful that some of the changes to the program agreement will help make things a little more consistent, including the funding. That was one thing I heard loud and clear from the providers, is that you know, the lack of funding is part of the issue in terms of the consistency and equity. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful.
So then that leads me to my next question is, do us as a district help them get to where we think they should be?
So in answer to that question, yes. We have an annual evaluation instrument that we use, referred to as ECHRS, is an environmental ratings system, which takes a look at both facility, program plan, as well as there's a staff component to it. That rating, there's a score that's arrived at. We actually contract with Western Dairyland to do those on an annual basis. Following the actual visit, and it's a one-day visit where they're there for an extended period of time, and they take a look at, like I said, multiple aspects of it. But following that visit, there's a review that is scheduled between the director, any staff that are involved in instruction with the students during the evaluation, and myself. And we sit down, go through, it's a very comprehensive document. And over the period of time that I've been in the district, which I'm in my 8th year now at this point in time in this capacity, we used it prior to me being in the district as well. We've seen overall increases in the ratings of all of our sites. I've also seen during that time frame the ratings have become much more consistent across our sites. So when possible, we utilize that tool to look at overall program improvement. In the case that there is a specific area of deficiency that's identified, then we meet with the individual site and review that. You know, so that's one aspect of it. You know, clearly we do receive some anecdotal feedback from our teaching staff in kindergarten and building principals and parents. You know, we always try and direct you know, specific questions back to the sites if there are specific concerns and address it that way. You know, there have been times where we've had to have more specific follow-up conversation on that. But overall, you know, I think we have a good process that's very objective, you know, and useful for us.
I'm just concerned with the $65 per kid that we end up putting these centers in a situation where they still can't keep going. And they're trying to work towards that second tier, but in the meantime, you know, where's our responsibility in helping to make sure they get there and then get there before we end up, you know, not being able to have them anymore. And I'm not done with my questions.
Can I piggyback off what you said? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I support what Tricia said there with the extra costs that they have. You know, they're hiring qualified teachers. The community-based, you know, facilities are providing their own food, their own electricity, their own everything. So I support, you know, I agree with what Tricia just said. Sorry.
I didn't want to lose my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
And then the busing, so Scout doesn't provide busing, right? Are they the only ones that don't, that don't provide busing?
So, no, so Stout does not provide busing, and Head Start up to this point has handled busing on their own. We did have some students who live in what I would call the far corners of our district that we've done some collaborative busing on this point. We do have one other site that does not do busing in the afternoon. They do busing in their morning program. What we do each year during our registration process, families identify if transportation is a need for them. One thing that we don't do is we don't bus from attendance at 4K at one location to then daycare at another. That would be a fairly large cost in addition to what we currently have. And up to this point, based off of the transportation requests that we've had, we have been able to meet that need with the current established routes that we have. But as I mentioned earlier, we've been watching transportation very closely the last few years, and we are seeing an increase in the number of requests for transportation with 4K. And at this point in time this year, one of the biggest challenges that we have is when a family moves in during the school year and enrolls and needs busing. We're very limited on spots that we have available without requiring sites to add additional staffing, which provides another challenge in and of itself. Which is why we're recommending that we need to add some busing for next school year as well.
Tricia?
One more thing.
To the previous question that you and Heather both commented on, I too am concerned to make, we don't want to hold people hostage, and we want to make sure people are getting the resources they need. My understanding in talking with Brian and meeting with the directors is that the full 7% threshold we're looking at is very attainable. In fact, preliminarily it looks like everyone is either meeting it already or very close. So it's not like we're trying to say you have to be a 10-time All-Star to get this level. It's just we want some base services that we think are necessary for success.
So one more thing, I promise myself. So when we first moved here, and I was trying to figure out, what do we do for childcare with both of my kids? They both went to Stout, and I even remember back then that there was, because I didn't know anybody, so I'd ask neighbors, I'd ask, people in the playgroups or whatever, like, where do you go for, childcare and 4K, and even back then, I remember people were talking about, this is where we love this versus this one, and everybody has their own personal opinion, but I just remember feeling like, gosh, it seems like it's us against them, and it's not a good feeling when you're trying to find something for your child, and that people are going to take care of your kids all day. But recently, I've heard better. There's not as much division, and this could just be my perspective, and I love that, and I love that. I'm not hearing as much. Divisiveness as I did back then. And so I guess that's my overall concern is I hate to do anything that pits one center against another because they're at tier 1 versus tier 2, and because I don't think that that's good for our entire, community. So just my 2 cents worth on that one.
Heather?
Have we ever looked at the busing from St. Joe's? Because it maybe it's changed, but if students attend St. Joe's at 4K, they are then bused to any child care facility afterwards. Is that still the case, and does that, as a big cost increase?
So St. Joe's, the students ride the larger school buses home at the end of the school day with all the rest of the students at St. Joe's. So that route is established like it is for any student that rides the large bus route. And I do know that we have students that leave our district elementary schools and get dropped at 4K daycare facilities. As far as does that in and of itself add to 4K costs, I don't think we've ever broken that down specific to St. Joe's. And again, because they're riding on that regular bus route that we are required to have at the end of the school day for dismissal at St. Joe's, I would anticipate that it's not a large cost, but we'd have to see if we can tease that information out.
Anything else?
What, if I figured right, with the transportation and the cost for the sites, it's a little under $1 million. With the rate increase, the tier increase, what other costs does the district incur other than transportation?
So outside of transportation, there's the administrative cost. A portion of my assistant, Carla, serves as a program assistant. She actually spends a large portion of her day associated with 4K from a placement standpoint, working on busing, enrollments, things like that, along with staff from our People Service Department when it comes to enrollment. When we take a look at special education services, students who are on IEPs, we do have itinerant staff throughout the district that service our 4K sites. I will say when we look at that, we are seeing an increase in requests as far as needs that students have at that level. A portion of our school psychologist time is also spent at our 4K sites. Any curriculum-related adoptions that we make. Now, what I will say is because we do contract with our sites, we operate more on an outcome-based program, so our annual curriculum-related costs associated with 4K are not, extremely high when you compare to some of our other programming throughout the district. But for example, this last year, we adopted an updated version of our social emotional learning resource, and that cost every one of our 4K sites received updated resources with that. So those would be an example of some of the costs associated with that. I couldn't give you an exact figure on that tonight, but those are the types of costs associated with it. So.
Heather?
I have 2 questions. So with tier 2, you're submitting weekly lessons plans to you. Do you have the time? I mean, that's a lot of extra work for you to do on top of everything else that you do,
So what we have discussed, what I've looked at is a way in which to receive those current plans that all of our sites currently require their teachers to do some version of planning. One of the challenges that we have when we onboard a new 4K teacher, be it on our district site at River Heights or one of our community sites, is getting them up to speed as to what the curriculum is and what that looks like. So we are proposing having that come in the format that teachers are currently using, to use it as a learning tool across the sites. So the short answer is, will I be reviewing every single lesson plan every single day? No, but we'll be building a repository so that as we go through professional development, we can take a look at what are some shared best practices across our sites with lesson plans to find out what works in one site and help them learn from each other. Being in another district that went through a period of time where weekly lesson plans were a requirement as far as being submitted, the reflection and taking a look back at what works, what doesn't work, that type of thing. That's the intent behind that. So that then also, as we have new staff who come on board, we have a starting point with them as far as lesson plans. Now, I wouldn't expect anybody to teach directly from those, but it gives them a starting point to say, here are some examples of what's being used, some different planning approaches, those types of things.
Okay, so then to transition what you said with professional development. With the tier 1 and tier 2, that looks like the tier 2, they have more opportunities for professional development. Is that how I interpret that, or is it the same?
It would be the same opportunity. One of the tweaks that we made a few years ago was to have the 4K teachers in district at every single district professional development day. Prior to that, 4K teachers from the sites were invited, but it wasn't required that they come. Based on feedback from the teachers for access to professional development, we added that in. From conversation with the teachers at our bi-monthly teacher meetings. The change that we're looking at doing is, we've done that for a few years, working to set a agreed upon calendar for professional development prior to the start of each school year on when we would have 4K specific professional development. to try and better meet their needs. And the 4K teachers have also implemented some additional collaborative pieces with each other that has helped get to that point where we're ready to make this type of change.
Thank you.
So,
Tanya?
Can you tell me, special education, how does it work for CARES?
Joan, if you want.
It all comes down to the IEP, so it's really depending on, I think the increase in cost there's a lot of consultation that takes place at that level, and a lot of time. So some of those concerns never come to a referral or even identifying, but there's a lot of time spent consultating. I would say our school site spends a great deal of time just working with the sites. Even our speech staff spends a lot of time working with increasing communication within that site. So some of the, we have OT, PT, speech, and teacher that go into those sites depending on the needs of the students.
David, did you have a question?
So this proposal will get us off the bottom, but not very much off the bottom. Are there, what are your, I mean, you must have plans down the road to get us more more equitable funding down the road as well?
Yeah, it's not that uncommon. Unfortunately, I don't know why it's like this, but it's not that uncommon in districts to see this type of thing where, whether you're talking about sub pay or coaching pay or 4K contracts, where you end up, having a big powwow when you set a mark, and then that mark ends up being the mark for a while. As you know, in our district, we've tried to put things in more of a program approach where we're looking at the cost of living increases similar to our transportation contract, similar to what we're doing with some other things, and that's what I like to see us do is put this more on an annual review process so that we're not all of a sudden finding ourselves in a situation where all of a sudden we need a big bump. But I think what you find in that list over time is you'll see the leapfrog effect, because that's what districts do is they there's no money, and then boom, all of a sudden there'll be we're last, and there'll be a big jump. I'd rather see something a little more consistent over time. So I think the opportunity for a 7% increase, considering CPI is 2.44, is a really good start to that. I do think that we're going to have to look at continued increases moving forward if we keep this model. But again, a lot of it's going to depend on the state funding. It's looking better, but I'd like to see that come out of Madison and see what we can do moving forward. But we'll continue to look at comparables.
The only thing I would add is we might have to make a similar increase next year just to get, a little more in the middle of the pack instead of being on the bottom end. The other question I have is, if we do go to 4K, or if the state does go to all-day 4K, how does that impact our district and with the multiple sites and
That's a really big question, Dave. I'd rather have some more time to put together a plan on that, and it would have a significant impact.
It would really, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just throwing it out there because something like that happens and it changes everything. So just so everybody knows.
I do think the evidence is fairly clear that getting the kids in earlier and providing them with good, healthy opportunities. Not necessarily sitting down in front of a teacher for 6 hours listening to lessons, play games, interactive activities. There's a lot to be said for that, and I think especially now more than ever, getting some of these kids a better early start can be real beneficial. So I'm very hopeful that something will happen with that, but there'll be a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Thank you.
All right, another good discussion. Anyone else? Okay, moving right along to D, SDMA employee compensation for 2019-20.
Does it feel to you tonight like we are spending a lot of money? Getting a little shaky here. So as you know, the CPI is 2.44. We put together a document. This is a very similar document from what you've seen in previous years. When we look at the hourly wages and the new system, the updated system that was put together last year, putting the CPI on that system would equate to about $93,000. For the executive assistants, coordinators, and directors, $1,400, $200, and $4,900 for those three categories. For 234 teachers, it'd be $312,172. And then with the administration, it'd be $39,295. You know, our teacher compensation system, I think has kept us very competitive. When you look at what we put into board docs, we put a sample model there where, let me just make sure I tell you the exact right numbers. Starting teacher pay would increase to $40,465, and top teachers would be earning $71,965. That does not include the longevity incentives or any coaching, advising, and summer school pay that we have available. And we think that all of our returning teachers would see between $975 or $1,975 increase depending on their placement in the salary schedule. There could be some teachers that would accomplish more than that if they receive their master's degree between now and next year.
What was that,
1975. It's there in board docs, Amy. I think it's the bottom of the third paragraph. Any questions or?
I know I sound like a broken record, and I know I have pointed this out, and I'm not going to make friends with people, but I just have to say it. It just kills me to see the hourly amount that paraeducators are paid versus, and I know food service is important, but to know the job that that group set does is just, I can't believe how crazy low it is. So I just have to throw it out there, and wow.
I would agree.
So Tanya, you're talking about the paraeducators?
Yeah, yep.
So just so everyone understands, so a first year paraeducator next year would come in at $14.65. After a year, they'd be at $15.40. And then 3 years, they'd be at $16.15. Then $16.65, $16.90, and then $17.15. I agree, our paraeducators do tremendous work. What I can tell you is when we met with the group last year, you know, we had representatives from every classification, and those are tough discussions. And I think the group, you know, we talked about breaking the paraeducators into multiple categories within that category, and they just didn't think it was appropriate. And you know, I think there was a lot of discussion about it last year, and I think this is what we felt is appropriate at this point.
I would agree that that we did have a discussion at QIC about it, but I also agree with you, Tanya. Heather?
I completely agree, and I know when we met at QIC, they were elated to have their license paid. I mean, they were ecstatic with that, and I was surprised they didn't want to just say, hey, let's take $1 increase or something. They were just happy as can be to have their license paid now. So, I mean, I totally agree with you that it is quite low, so.
Any other questions? Yes, Joe. Oh, I'm sorry, David.
So with this model, then you'd be eliminating the lowest level and adding one more at the top?
For the teachers,
yeah,
yes.
for the teachers.
Yep.
I know that it's been an issue with teachers that are on top of the pay scale. They feel like they get to a certain point and they can't go any further. So I think that that is a wise move.
And that was a few years ago. We've fixed that now for a few years, but I agree, a few years ago there was that issue, and CPI was so low. And if you recall, the board has put additional money into the compensation plan because the CPI was so low. It's nice that this year not only will the CPI pay for steps, but also moving the whole scale beyond those steps. So that's a really good thing. So the plan then would be, I do plan on meeting with the QIC groups to review the wage schedules, and then the wage schedules for hourly for the teachers, and then all the other individual contracts, they'll be on the board meeting agenda in April for approval.
Heather.
Okay, I just gotta say, I'm very passionate about the 4K program. And when my daughter was in 4K, we learned a lot about everything and kind of a little bit about that. But it just feels like, I mean, you're talking about money, Joe, and I agree. We're talking a lot about money tonight. And I look at this and think, can we do more for the 4K programs? Because I would hate to lose that community base, that partnership, that relationship. I mean, they have to hire a qualified teacher. And I just wanted to say, I just feel like there's more we could possibly do. I don't know what we could, but I just feel like they somehow get left out a little bit. And I don't know.
Well, we're looking at 2.44 for all of our staff here in the district, and we're looking at 7% for our 4K programs for 1920.
Well, and that I get, but it's also been a big gap where they haven't received anything, and as we know, every expense is going up with food and heating and your own, cleaning, and I feel like, they employ that, and, I understand it's community-based, but I just feel like I just feel like there's a little bit disconnect. I want to support the 4K
Right.
program because I agree, you don't want to pin anybody up, but it's also these children's first opportunity to education and schooling, and making sure that they have a great foundation to go through Menomonie. So I don't know, I wanted to just say that.
I think it's nice to feel that way, and if the board wants to spend more money, we certainly can. But like Brian started the whole discussion out, when Act 10 came, all of our teachers, all of our administrators, all of our paras, everyone who works in the district took a huge, huge cut. All of a sudden, they're starting to pay half of their own retirement, which hadn't been covered by the district. Most places, 100% of the health insurance or 95% of the health insurance was being paid. So now everyone's picking up, another 10% of those premiums. People across the district took huge hits, and there was no reduction to the 4K. The 4K amount stayed flat. We are just now, if we did the calculation, I think we're like $14 over the mark of what it was before Act 10. So there's been years and years and years where it didn't get reduced, and it needs to be increased. We all agree, and our recommendation is 7%.
I'm just also curious, do you have any data on how many 4K teachers leave? I guess I just thought about that. Is that something you have, like?
Off the top of my head, no. We could go back and take a look at, trying to mine that data, working with our sites to see. I do know we have hired, in the last 8 years, we absolutely have hired new 4K teachers.
Yeah.
We hired a new one here in the district at our 4K site in the time that we've actually are on our third 4K teacher at the district site in that same time frame. So,
I'm just curious.
I know we've hired at our sites. Each year we've had at least one. And some years we've had more. I'd have to go back and look and see if we've had a year where we've only had one.
Like that report?
Sure, if you have time.
Okay.
In your busy schedule, no rush on it. I'm just curious, like, if 4K teachers leave because of the pay that they receive at the facility, or if they leave because of, you may not have that data, but how many just kind of turnover?
Yeah,
I know when my daughter was in there, she had quite a turnover, but.
I would say it would be hard for us to quantify the reason. I think, anecdotally there might be, some ideas.
And honestly, there's no rush on the report. I'm just more curious if there has been trends, if you do have that. And I like to see the data,
It's kind of your thing.
It is kind of my thing, yeah.
Okay, and I think it would be great if you sent it to the whole board, just because Heather requested it.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Tricia?
Okay, I promise, less Tricia, but she just, sorry, I'm sorry. So, how does the professional development days work for the 4Kers? I know like with school being done, like with the regular elementary school, school's closed and so they're able to, the teachers go, but the 4K, is it the same or how does that work with the staffing and, am I making any sense?
Yeah, so the short answer is I don't know how it's handled at each site. Some of our sites have salaried positions for 4K teacher. Most of our community sites, this is my understanding that most of their employees are hourly for the community sites. So they do release their staff to come and participate in professional development as needed. And it is up to them to decide how they then operate their site. It's not a day for 4K on the days that professional development for 4K happens because they run on the same calendar. That being said, do the 4K teachers also, if there's only a half-day program, are they employed the other portion of the day? Again, that's a site-level decision, and we are not involved in that process.
But I could see how that adds to the overall cost of everything, it makes it challenging for them. Yeah, so, okay.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks for the other, oh, David, I'm sorry.
Just want to thank Joe and Denise and Brian for all the work you guys do.
Thank you. Okay, another good discussion, so strategic planning update.
So the steering committee met on March 4th, very good meeting, and completed the synthesis of the data reports, and we now have the structure, the skeleton of the next strategic plan. There's a lot of work to do yet to put the meat on the bones, and Studer is working on that. I know there's going to be a conference call with the administrative team next week, actually, yeah, next week, and it still looks 100% goal timeline in terms of getting the board the strategic plan to review before the end of the school year. If you look at that attached copy of the working plan, it's crazy. It's 5 pages of all the work we've done over the last year for strategic planning, and it's kind of fun. I actually spent some time reading through it before the board meeting, and you look at what we were doing this time last year in terms of hearing presentations and trying to figure out, hiring a third-party facilitator. And I'm very pleased with the process, and I don't know if any other people that are on the committee, Dave, I know you were giving comments about it.
Yeah, so I think it amazes me, over 1,300 survey responses, over 40 focus group discussions that this group has had through the year, and I feel really good about where the process is at, and the group that was involved with it, and how it's all boiling down, just a pretty important thing. So I think it should be one of our key focuses once we get it finalized moving forward for the district.
Anybody else? Okay, and then F is the review items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. Pretty much informational.
Amy, it's important to note there's no second meeting in March because of spring break.
Okay,
so the next
March 25th.
Right, so the next meeting is April 8th, unless something critical comes up and a special meeting is needed.
Okay, we need to take at least a 5-minute break because the president needs to use the bathroom.
Sesame.
Amy?
Yes.
Does item B, should that have an attachment with it, Joe? And
Yes, the attachment, I can tell you right now, is in...
just as a point of order.
Is it still on the consent agenda?
Yeah, it's still on the consent agenda.
I should be able to take care of that quick.
Under executive content right now, under the consent agenda, but if you want to move it, you can.
So which one are we missing?
Exhibit 225, District Administrator Evaluation Instrument.
The exhibit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the exhibit,
Got
added
it.
March 11th. Just there, all those messages from Steyer and Swanson and
Yep. You can go ahead and get started, but I can get it going in here in a minute, unless you want. What's going on here? So it take you a minute. If you want to get started with the discussion, go ahead.
Okay,
First
okay.
one.
All right, it's going to take Joe, so let's go ahead and start discussing. Jim.
Okay, so I asked that this be moved out of consent to action for a couple of reasons. One, I thought there was a lot of changes made, and it really wasn't appropriate for consent. But the other two things I would just like, and I think most of what's here is fairly good. Two things I would suggest is one, that Exhibit 255, I think, shows the form that we used last time. And we had said that we adopted this form. We never actually adopted the form that's listed. The reason I like the WASB form is because it comes with a whole program. It comes with a whole training thing. You know, as Joe stated, and everybody stated, that it has not gone well. WASB is the professionals here. That's why we adopted the WASB program before, to improve the way we did this. We didn't launch it very well, but I mean, this retreat, we could get a lot of students to do a whole retreat on nothing but evaluation, how to do the process properly. So I really think that I would suggest that we change it, it says Exhibit 255 with a form that was drawn up here in-house, be changed so that the WASB form is there instead, just because I think it's more professional, it's more thorough, and we'll do a much better job and we can get better training.
David?
I guess I disagree. Spending quite a few years using that form, it was really confusing. I think the one that we have now is an excellent tool that is more concise. It's can be aligned much better with our actual plan of work that Joe and the board comes up with. And so I'd like to use the one that we have been using for the past year. And I'd like to see that one put forth.
Heather?
I echo David's words. Being a new board member last year, I received 0 training on it. Came to eval time, it was not a tool I could pick up and just fill out. I like the new form better. It is shorter, is more concise. It goes off of how we direct Joe. And when I looked around the area at different district evaluation instruments, I did not see one that adopted the WASB one, but adopted something more similar to this, to their own rendition of an evaluation form for the administrator.
Point of order, are we on policy first, or are we going to do the form first? Because we're talking about the form, and it's listed policy first.
Okay, I think we probably need to stick to the policy first. David? I mean, Jim. Fixing my
Am I going bald or what?
You can only wish.
Yeah. No, well, the reason I referenced the form is because it's referenced in the policy. And I totally disagree that this form does need some training, but this is much similar to what teachers and other people use. It's much more thorough. I mean, I think that if you need a little training, or if you don't understand, I mean, if you're on the board and this is a complicated form, I think you owe it a commitment to actually learn how to use the form. I think if we have a training, it'll be very simple. We had a training once. It's not that difficult to understand. I also like something that it talks about in here is that one of the things you discuss is the span of control versus not in the other form. It doesn't have that. So I think this form and the thing that comes with it to WASB is much more professional. I think it is much more thorough. I think it'll give Joe a much fairer evaluation in the long run, and I think it'll help him improve his performance. So I think this is, to me, this is the majors. The form that they came up with is the minors, and if we want to do things right, we need to play in the majors.
David?
I guess I've had training on that form, and I don't consider myself to be a dummy. I just struggled with it every time we used it. And I think this one is just so much more concise, the Exhibit 225 that we have in there. And so I just think that while you're a policy guy, Jim, it's the stuff that you love, you know, that the meat of some of these forms and the in-depth that they get and things like that. I think it's tough for a lot of us to do an effective evaluation with something that complicated and overbearing.
Heather?
As a new board member last year, I did ask for guidance on this. I was told it's easy, just go with the flow. So I, after the last eval, had sent some ideas to be more concise. They are using shorter forms nowadays. I think this does provide us guidance to help Joe. I think it is fair, and it helps him to achieve what we are looking for him and to help improve in the area if need be. I'm not real fond of outstanding needs expectations and needs development. I mean, I could do with different wordings, but I am totally on board with this one. I think anybody can come on here as a new board member and pick it up and decide what to do. Until we have a formal process of board training, board member training, new ones, no one will be able to pick that up and understand that WASB one.
Oh, I did.
I agree.
Tricia? I did find the WASB one to be confusing, but I don't like the one that we have either, because I don't think it provides enough information for what that's worth. It's just my 2 cents. So, I don't know, you were saying this might be a hybrid version somewhere?
What else would you want on it? Sorry.
That's what,
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing, but go ahead. Ask your question.
well, that's why I was just asking, like, what's the, you said you found another one somewhere?
Well, I found a few of them that I had sent at the time. I'd have to pull up my email, but and see what forms. And I just kind of did a hybrid of them, or you know, it was a hybrid that was pulled together. But it was something that anybody could sit down and do. Again, I think until you have more formal training as a new board member, as far as maybe a mentor or quarterly communication with the president or something, I don't think that long one is. I don't find it to be effective.
David?
I just think a lot of the information, to Tricia's point, a lot of times it's more of a matter of tying the information to the evaluation tool, and that's something I think we can still work on with this evaluation tool. It's just a matter of getting that information tied to it so you can make a proper evaluation as far as goals accomplished.
Dan?
Yeah, I agree with David. In the policy here, it says the board shall seek multiple sources of information on performance. That's still pretty wide open. I don't know what that means. And so, you know, how do we know, what are we using to evaluate him on? We have the forms and everything, but what data is that do we look at to keep it from going to hearsay and innuendo? You know, how do we get that, that kind of information?
I'm all for like a 360 where you actually have, other stuff, not just only your stuff that you provide, Joe, but like, maybe from the community standpoint, the teachers or whatever, and if that's what you cover, so you have to do some research on 360, so that they can be very effective. What I do like about the one that we just used and that we're talking about, not the one that Jim has, but the one. One thing I will say is I really like the idea that we can give him things to improve on, because I think that has been something that we have left is where we have not given him any direction as to how to improve things that we might be concerned about. And the example being, how you went to that session at the ASSA. Yes.
From my perspective, I found it a lot more useful to get the evaluation this year out of this form. The previous few years, I had to work with the board president and then also my assistant to actually then type up on letterhead kind of a summary of that form. And even just trying to decipher from that form into a summary was a mess. And that doesn't really provide the instructions as well as and clear as the new exhibit. So from the what would I be? The evaluatee, not the evaluator. I found it to be a lot more beneficial.
David?
I'd like to make a formal motion to approve policy 225, district matter administrative evaluation. The only thing I'll say is the only question I have in there is the 1 week or 2 week. In this one now it's 2 weeks. The one that we had before was back and forth. So that's my motion.
2 weeks for
Board president notice to board directors about evaluation coming up.
Yeah, if you could hold 1 second, I think when she moved the agenda item, she may not have moved the correct one, because I tried to blend what Jim had written and what Dave had written, and it went.
I may have missed some of the other things.
2 weeks to 1 week.
The one that was on top with their thing, that one I liked.
Tricia?
Am I doing this out of order?
We have a motion. I'm holding right now.
Okay.
You don't have a second yet, so you're okay.
Okay, good. Because one thing that I maybe this isn't the right place to put it, but, and I mentioned this before, I would really, really, really like more information about the procedure, understanding that the president is the one who takes over, that the superintendent leaves, that the president hands out the evaluations, that we go through, we score it, and then it's all, like that whole process, because I was completely lost of how that works. So maybe it doesn't need to be done that way, but I feel like I need more detail, but I don't.
What was your motion, Dan?
Basically, when Joe gets the right form down into the action agenda, item 7A for approval.
Where are you at, 7?
If you go down below
I don't
the,
have anything.
I just put it in.
I want to see if you're going to second this. Did it change from what was up there before, previously
it's
posted?
the one that Joe had tied into the original consent agenda. That,
Okay, so you have a
It's what
motion.
you used last time. what we
Okay,
selected.
then I second.
Yes.
Okay, so more discussion.
Okay, we
yeah.
can.
Yes.
Okay, because I just wondering what people thought about what I said, so that I just don't, where do we go from there with that? Is there anything else we can do for me?
I guess the one thing I would say, Trish, with your comment, I think that will vary a lot depending on board leadership and how they handle it. And, I was kind of in awe when Colleen and Jay were board presidents and they just mowed right through it. But they had experience and a lot of years on the board. And she did a good job on this, I think, from the evaluation tool. So, but I know I've been on the board for a while, but they know how to do it. And Dan being first year is just tough, knowing how to do the evaluation process and that. And so that changes a lot depending on how it's taken care of.
Okay, so we have a motion and a
So
second.
am I recording the?
Yeah, did you get the motion second?
Yeah, so, let me write this down.
So could you just clarify, say the motion is again for everybody's benefit, including mine?
Okay, let me go back.
Motion to adopt.
Policy 225, district administrator evaluation.
Are you doing the whole, are you just doing the form first? Are you doing everything?
Can we do them both together?
They're separate items. I think I would suggest taking motion separately. So the policy first.
The first one is the
Well,
policy.
you have to adopt the form first and then the policy, because the policies are into the form. The form's written into the policy, so you got to do the form first, and then you can do the policy.
True.
That's why I asked before.
Yeah.
how we were
Yeah.
doing
Okay,
it.
so let's do the form first.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make
What's
a
the
motion to adopt Exhibit 225, District Administrator Evaluation Instrument. That is my motion.
Planner and seconded.
I'm just gonna,
David,
just
Heather. All right,
just
so.
a second.
Any discussion?
Okay,
Okay, I guess we're
are
ready.
we ready? Dan,
Yes?
Amy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jim, no. Tricia,
Yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Tanya,
Yes.
and Heather.
Yes.
Okay, it passes 8-1.
Now I'll make a second motion to adopt policy 225, District Administrator Evaluation.
So move, or second.
David, and Heather?
Before you vote, Dan, you weren't here the last meeting. I just want to make sure that, because I know you and I had a lengthy discussion about the rating scale.
Right.
And how
I
it,
saw the difference.
okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Any discussion about that motion?
Tricia, any more questions?
Okay, I guess no discussion. Ready to vote?
Okay, Amy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jim? Yes. Tricia?
Yes.
Penny?
Yes.
Tanya?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Wayne and James?
Yes.
Passes 9-0.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order that's we can talk about?